Good afternoon, esteemed chairpersons, ladies and gentlemen. My trial is Orbiter, and I have to explain two things with regard to this trial, as the caption says. Why I should congratulate the investigators, but again, in the same breath, I should explain why it should not change my practice. Now, whereas PCI in ACS is a resolved issue, PCI in stable ischemic heart disease continues to be a bone of contention for us. And the reasons are, we are still questioning ourselves what is the best initial management strategy for patients with SIHD, and what is the evidence that early revascularization improves prognosis. Now, you are all aware of these contemporary studies with regard to SIHD, Courage, Barry 2D, FAME 2 stitch, and the last one, that is ischemia, is still going on. Now, what has been irrefutably proven in these studies is that RCTs have not been able to demonstrate a survival benefit for fixing coronary stenosis in SIHD. And the reasons that have been put forward are that dissociation between the angiographic or physiologic severity of a stenosis and underlying atheroma and propensity to become a culprit lesion. Atherosclerosis is known to be a systemic and a progressive disease with diffuse coronary artery involvement, and intensive guideline-directed medical therapy and lifestyle intervention have changed the underlying biology and natural history of atherothrombotic disease. So the fundamental question that we continue to ask ourselves, if clinical trials in the OMT era show no clear death or MI benefit from an initial strategy of revascularization, do we need to cap or revascularize patients prior to initiating an empiric trial of OMT? This is the trial I talked about, ischemia trial. It's still ongoing. A large trial, sample size 8,000, average follow-up 4 years. The groups are PCI or CABG plus OMT, whether it is superior to a conservative strategy of OMT alone, with cap reserved for OMT failure. Composite primary endpoint is CV death or MI, and secondary endpoint is angina-related quality of life. But till the ischemia result, with unblinded, I emphasize on the word unblinded. So the sample size was calculated to be about 200 patients. The inclusion criteria, stable angina, one or more 70% stenosis in a single vessel, and they should be suitable for PCI angiographically. So the trial design was that there was an enrollment process, then medical optimization phase, then the pre-randomization assessment with regard to CCS score, and the Seattle Angina Questionnaire with my previous speaker just alluded to. Then they had the blinded procedure. They had the angiogram, and they also had as a research protocol not only FFR but the new IFR, that is instantaneous wave-free ratio assessment also. Then the blinded procedure was carried out, either actual PCI or the placebo procedure. The follow-up assessment again included the same parameters, and both pre and randomization and follow-up included exercise test and Strays-Echo assessment of wall motion abnormalities. The usual blinding procedures were done. Same medical therapy was given to both the arms. The placebo arm also treated as if PCI was done. There was no access to CAT report for patients and their parties, and they were given the same discharge letter. So this is the trial designed in a nutshell. They started with 230 patients enrolled, ultimately 200 patients randomized, and then divided in the two groups, that is the actual PCI and the placebo procedure. The stenosis severity, FFR and IFR parameters, as you can see here, were absolutely comparable in the two arms. In terms of the primary endpoint result, the change in total exercise time, there was a marginal benefit in the PCI arm compared to the placebo of plus 16.6 seconds, which was not significant. But in terms of the Strays-Echo results, in terms of peak stress wall motion index score, there was a significant reduction in the ischemia burden in the PCI group compared to the placebo group. And you can see the p-value was significant. In terms of the CCS class improvement, the two groups were comparable. So the conclusions of the Orbiter trial was that it is the first placebo-controlled randomization trial of PCI in stable angina. Patients had significant stenosis in terms of the quantitative assessment, FFR and IFR. PCI was safe and physiologically effective. It significantly reduced ischemia burden as assessed by Stresico. And in this single vessel angiographically guided trial, there was no difference in exercise time increment between PCI and placebo. So in context, it was a single vessel PCI for stable angina, guided by angiography. Focus was on symptomatic relief, and intensive medical therapy was given to both the PCI and the placebo controlled arm. But there are some criticisms. Power of the study to detect a difference between the groups was lower than planned, perhaps as low as 20%. Comparing changes in a parameter such as exercise time is fraught with difficulty when the starting point in the two groups are different. Mean exercise time was 30 seconds higher at baseline than in the PCI group. Population was low risk. Everyone had single vessel disease. The dobutamine Stresico wall motion score was only 1.1 at baseline, and mean exercise time was 8 minutes and 48 seconds at the baseline in both the groups. PCI was able to normalize in the physiology assessed by FFR, IFR. It significantly reduced ischemia burden by Stresico and even increased exercise duration compared to baseline by 28.4 seconds. But remember, the patient's population chosen was little elderly, so within the short-term follow-up of 6 weeks, it is not easy to get an average 65 years old exercise duration up further when it starts at that level of 8 minutes 48 seconds. So just like the OMT used in Courage trial, the real-life scenario is that who does have the time and patience to call patients 3 times per week outside the RCT scenario to assess their response to intensive medical therapy. This is not a real-world proposition. So Orbita was a trial which was designed to succeed. Beauty of its design is not that it mirrors real-life practice, but it internalizes the clinical uncertainties that cardiologists face. Duration of run-in and follow-up gives an idea of duration in which medical therapy should be encouraged and actively pursued. It also suggests that in patients with an exercise time greater than 8 minutes, medical therapy should be pursued with the greatest vigor. So I thought that I should propose this line of management till ischemia results are published. If you have a patient of stable angina, cardiac CT should be done to exclude LMCA disease or LMCA equivalent, as is also being done in the ischemia trial. Give OMT for a short burst. If symptoms improve and patient is satisfied, continue OMT. If symptoms don't improve, go for exercise stress test. If exercise time is more than 8 minutes, continue OMT. If it is less than 6 minutes, FFR-guided PCI should be done. So my reaction to Orbita, keep on stenting judiciously in stable ischemic heart disease. So to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, whether PCI is indicated for better outcome in stable patients with CAD, independent of symptoms, could not have nor was it intended to be addressed in Orbita. This will require a much larger RCT using state-of-the-art technology such as ongoing ischemia trial. But a rider from this Orbita trial that 4 patients in the placebo group had pressure wear related problems. Whether it was accidental or operator inexperience is not known to us, but this will lead to more use of non-invasive FFR with CT or MRI at the same time when the first assessment is done is to be a more accessible alternative. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.